Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of September the 28th and 29th, 2024. Overall, there probably isn't a great deal happening this weekend, at least in an astrological sense, but I do note that the Sun is making a conjunction to the South Node. South Node, sometimes called ketu, at least in Vedic astrology it's ketu. And so I want to consider what it means for the Sun to be conjunct the South Node. And I'll be looking at some charts of people and a few events that have this configuration. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. Just a reminder, usual reminder, sorry to be boring, but if you enjoy this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed and you enjoy the video, I would of course be over the moon if you were to subscribe. Anyway, let's look at what's actually going on this weekend. So here we have the positions of the planets at midnight on Sunday. That's right in the middle of the weekend. So I've set this for New York. So it doesn't really matter, the fact that I've set it for New York, it's just a matter of convenience. And so you can see that as Saturday becomes Sunday, the moon is in late Leo. So that means that by and large on Saturday the moon is in Leo, and on Sunday the moon is in Virgo. Of course that does depend to an extent on your time zone. So we have this transition from Leo to Virgo. I mean, in some ways, there is a similarity between Leo and Virgo. I mean, I know in a way there's not a similarity. They're very different signs. You know, one is a fire sign, the other is an earth sign. But, you know, one way of looking at these charts looking at these signs is to perhaps use sort of a traditional approach and to say that they are the barren signs. Now, that's perhaps something we're not perhaps used to in modern astrology, but both were seen as being barren, as being fairly sort of lifeless in their own ways. Now, that sort of makes sense, maybe. Maybe, Leo is just a bit too burnt out. Virgo is just a bit too analytical, maybe. Of course, that's not really how the ancients saw Virgo. But there is something a little detached in a way about both Leo and Virgo. And they're not particularly emotional signs. And I think that's perhaps how we might want to see that barrenness. I wouldn't have said that either sign is sort of brimming with emotion. You might think that moon in Leo is, but it's not really. It's moon in a fire sign. It's very much about energy, the spark, getting attention. But that flow of emotion, perhaps not. So all things being equal, you might say that that's how these two signs are similar to each other. But I understand that you might disagree with me. I'm of course looking at two signs completely in isolation, and I'm not considering what else is going on in the horoscope. And we have got Venus in Scorpio and Mars in Cancer, and we've almost got a grand trine in water. So what I've just said about moon in Leo, moon in Virgo, perhaps is contradicted by what else is going on. Yeah, it's not quite a grand trine in water, but we've got Venus in Scorpio applying to Mars in Cancer, and you've got Mars moving to a trine of Saturn. That trine between Mars and Saturn, I think that starts to take place, very late on Saturday and into Monday, kind of depends on your time zone. But I suppose we also have to consider what is the difference between Leo and Virgo. Leo is a sign which is about attention, which is about getting people to acknowledge us, and by the same token, us acknowledging other people. And Virgo is more analytical, looking at things in terms of their details, perhaps breaking them down into their component parts. That can be one aspect of how Moon in Virgo does work. Now, as far as aspects are concerned, there isn't much going on actually this weekend. On Saturday we have Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter. So Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter, you might see that simply as being about Venus and Jupiter making a connection. And I suppose you could say Venus and Jupiter making a connection is about happiness and optimism. But on the other hand, it is a sesquiquadrate, so there is a bit of tension there. And when you see a tense aspect between Venus and Jupiter, you might want to see that in terms of taking things too far, particularly on an emotional level. Again, I'm perhaps contradicting what I just said about the impact of the sun and moon of the moon being in barren signs, whether it's in Leo or Virgo. Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter can be a little bit excessive. Perhaps if we feel that there is not much going on, as if we feel that something needs to happen, as if we feel that things are a little too barren, maybe, we might feel that we need to do something. We need to go over the top to create some happiness and warmth. And so in this sense, with Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter, perhaps we have to be careful about excessive emotion, excessive expenditure, trying too hard to make things happen. And on Saturday, the moon does make a sextile to Jupiter. So the moon in Leo makes a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini. Nice aspect. Again, that's an aspect that does suggest a bit of warmth, but it's not a particularly emotional sextile between the moon and Jupiter. Moon is in Leo, Jupiter is in Gemini. That's more about just mental stimulation, perhaps. Doing something that's interesting and that's exciting, and just having some enthusiasm. Then on Sunday, as the moon starts to leave Leo, it makes a square to Uranus. And moon square Uranus, it can stir things up. It can create a little bit of excitement. Maybe there's going to be a sense of drama. I mean, I suppose you could say that is Moon approaching the fixed star Regulus square Uranus. Someone thinks they're a king or a queen and wants to be treated as such. So that might be one manifestation of the moon squaring Uranus. And then on Sunday, the moon goes into Virgo at 10:42 a.m. London time. So that means that late morning in Europe, you get the changeover from Leo to Virgo. That changeover is going to happen very early on Sunday in the Americas. So that changeover may kind of bring things to a halt, because once the moon has moved into Virgo, it doesn't do a great deal for it. Its next aspect is a sextile to Venus, but it takes a bit of time for that sextile to Venus to come into action. I mean, it does eventually get there, but that's quite sort of subtle. I think that moon in Virgo, we perhaps have to sort of see that as maybe moon moving into Virgo bringing something to a close. And perhaps, Sunday is often a day when we try to get things together, isn't it? We have to prepare for the new week. And I suppose with moon in Virgo, one can imagine ourselves wondering about the challenges of a new week and perhaps trying to get things together, organise things. The party's over. That might be a certain feeling with moon moving into Virgo, that the party is over and that we've now got to address ourselves to, whatever important things need to be dealt with. So that's the broad picture for the weekend. Oh, one other thing. Mars is at 1353 Cancer. So Mars is conjunct the fixed star Sirius. Sirius is an important fixed star, and generally speaking, it is seen as being favourable. It is about honour and preferment, and can be about military honour. And just looking at what Vivian Robson says about it in his book Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology. Of course, Sirius is the dog star. I don't know whether dogs are relevant this weekend. I suppose one might have to be careful about dogs over the weekend with Mars. I mean, Mars is quite an aggressive energy, or you might have a strong connection with your own dog, or your dog might want a lot of attention. That's possible. And of course, it's got this great association of Egypt. So there may be a bit of an Egyptian theme to the weekend, because if you look at what Robson says, from Seros, sparkling or scorching, or according to some authors from the Egyptian god Osiris, among the basis of the Sophic period of chronology. The Chinese knew it as Xin Lang, the heavenly wolf. That's a nice dog star theme. And said that when unusually bright, it portended attacks from thieves. But it gives honour, renown, wealth, ardour, faithfulness, devotion, passion and resentment, and makes its natives custodians, curators, and guardians. I mean, that's very appropriate for the fixed star being in Cancer. So perhaps with Mars in Cancer, there are things that we need to be protective about. I mean, in general, that's Mars in Cancer, isn't it? But perhaps when Mars is conjunct Sirius, all the more so. And as far as what it means with Mars, courageous, generous, military preferment, work in connection with metals. So there may be a place for courage over the weekend, but of course we don't want to overdo it. Now I just want to quickly look at the weekend's astrology from the perspective of Sydney, Australia. So this is the picture for midnight Saturday, Sunday, but set for Sydney, Australia. So this is kind of representative of Australasia and Eastern Asia. And you saw that midnight, middle of the weekend in New York, the moon was at 27 Leo. If you set that for Sydney, the moon is at 20 degrees Leo. So that's a reminder that if you are in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is going to be in Leo pretty much for the whole weekend. It will eventually go into Virgo, but that would be more Sunday evening, pretty much when the weekend is over. So if you're in Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, it's pretty much a moon in Leo weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. And I think that perhaps that moon square Uranus I was talking about is going to be particularly important over the week on Sunday. So Sunday could be moon in Leo square Uranus, could be a day when people are irritated. Maybe you're irritated. It may feel that something has to give. People may be quite stubborn. Yet on Saturday, the main aspect is perhaps moon moving towards a sextile of Jupiter. So if you're in Australasia, Saturday does look like being an easier day than Sunday. So turning to the heliocentric picture, just to see if anything of interest crops up. Here we go. There we go. There it is. So from a heliocentric perspective, Mercury is trine Pluto. So can you see that? Heliocentric Mercury in Libra, trine heliocentric Pluto in Aquarius. And in fact, we do have a heliocentric grand trine. Mercury in Libra, Pluto in Aquarius, and Mars in Gemini. So with that heliocentric grand trine, there is a sense that things are moving, and if we want things to happen, perhaps we can make things happen. In fact, the heliocentric Grand Trine kind of gives us a different picture. It makes the weekend a bit more exciting, a bit more action orientated, a bit more power orientated, and it's very much connected with Mercury. It's how we communicate, how we perhaps try to persuade people, and we can perhaps use language in a very powerful way, and through our choice of words we can really start to make things happen. And so that can be good. Of course, when you're dealing with Mercury-Pluto aspects, you've got someone who is persuading, and you've also got someone who is being persuaded. So perhaps you have to ask yourself, which one are you? Yes, you can be very persuasive if that's what you want to do. But on the other hand, you could be the one being persuaded. There are people who make a lot of sense or appear to make a lot of sense, and their arguments are difficult to discount. And indeed, the force of their personality may be difficult to discount. Even if someone's got bad ideas, their conviction may be very alluring. So perhaps in certain situations, we have to be a little bit careful about that Grand Trine in Grand Trine in air signs. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned, which I mentioned right at the beginning of the video, but I should have mentioned the fact that this weekend the Sun is conjunct the South Node. Now, I'm going to be talking about the Sun conjunct the South Node in detail at the end of this video, and I will be using some examples. But just a reminder, there is the Sun at 6 Libra, South Node at 6 Libra, or 6 or 7 Libra, and I would have said that the Sun conjunct South Node, all things being equal, is probably not fortunate. The South Node is malefic. It's of the nature of Saturn, at least in Western astrology, at least traditional Western astrology. And a more sort of modern view of the South Node is that it's connected with the past, even the karmic past. And so there may be just something about Sun conjunct South Node where all of us just feel pulled in the wrong direction. We're being pulled to go back to old habits, old behaviors. So over the weekend, you may feel that the best way to assert yourself, maybe if you feel you're not getting enough attention, is to do something you used to do in the past. And then you have to consider, was that really the right thing to do? It may be the wrong thing to do. Or the South Node can be about connections. There may be a temptation to mix with people who you should have perhaps said goodbye to a long time ago, especially as Mercury is actually starting to make a conjunction to the South Node. So we actually have Sun, Mercury, and the South Node together in Libra. So there is a big pull, I think, to think in a way that we should have perhaps grown out of, to express ourselves in a way we've grown out of, and to go back to places which we haven't visited for a long time. It's always nice to go back to places that we haven't visited, but as they say, as the Beatles said, places some have changed, some have. How does a Beatles song go? Places have changed, some not for better. That's always the case, isn't it? When we go back to somewhere that we haven't been to for a long time, when we were happy there, we want to go back there, and we do go back sometimes, and it's such a disappointment. And so perhaps there is the idea that we should not turn back. We shouldn't perhaps even look back. We have to remember what happened to Lot's wife as they were escaping Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible. Didn't Lot's wife turn back and get turned into a pillar of salt? So it's not a time to be looking back. We need to be looking forward. But the temptation is to look back. But we need to sort of have our blinkers on. I mean, not blinkers in the sense of trying to hide reality, blinkers just to stop ourselves from looking at things that have we should have grown out of. We have grown out of them, but we still kind of attempted to go back. Anyway, let me now look at the weekend from the perspective of the 12 signs. I'm hoping I don't have so much to say on the 12 signs because there isn't much going on, actually, astrologically. So let's see what happens. Anyway, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of September the 28th and 29th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you are feeling that you can cover a great deal of ground, even though you are in, I believe, quite a protected environment. You are looking after things and you understand your responsibilities. You perhaps understand your responsibilities more than usual, especially on Sunday. But in this protected environment, you are strong. You do have an incredible amount of strength. And I think this is connected with the fact that Mars is on Sirius, the fixed star Sirius. And so with Mars on Sirius, try to achieve whatever you can this weekend. I mean, I understand that there are limits. You can't achieve everything. You know, we talk about military preferment. I suspect you're not a general in the middle of a battle. You're having to deal with things on a sort of a lower level. But whatever campaigns you're involved with, whatever battles you're involved with, I do think that you can actually be very successful, and that you do actually have to think for yourself. You know, it's your ideas that matter. Yes, there will be a temptation to listen to other people, to take into account what other people want, what other people are doing, what other people are saying. But I would suggest, Aries, that you do try to resist that temptation, because, Aries, I think you're the one that knows what's going on. You're the one that should be in control. And remember the heliocentric picture. So from a heliocentric picture, Mars is actually involved in a grand trine. Mars is involved in a grand trine heliocentrically with Mercury and Pluto. So that's more evidence that you do have a lot of power at your disposal. And it's just easy power, because it's that heliocentric grand trine. It all just comes together very quickly. It's not like you have to use overwhelming force to get your way. No, you just have to be yourself and just be very clear what you want. And really, that's all it takes. Though there is a slight difference between Saturday and Sunday. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, there isn't going to be much of a difference between Saturday and Sunday. I think that in Australia and New Zealand, it's probably going to be perhaps an easier day where there's perhaps less responsibility than if you're in if you're in America or in Western Europe. But there's going to be less responsibility, and perhaps you can focus more on the fun side of things. Whereas if you're in the Americas or Europe, Saturday, things can be more fun, they can be more spontaneous. Sunday, you start to have to deal with a certain amount of responsibility. And I think you do feel a sense of responsibility. And even if you're in Australia and New Zealand, maybe the responsibility starts to kick in sort of Monday. But and maybe that's connected with this idea that Robson was talking about with Mars conjunct Sirius, about being responsible for something, being a custodian, because with Mars on this fixed star. So it is something that you do need to look after, and you need to make sure that everything is just in order. Now, as I've said, it's important that you're the one in control this weekend. It's not about doing things other people's way. And, we do have this sesquiquadrate between Venus and Jupiter. And Venus is connected with relationships in the Aries chart, because Venus rules Libra. And so with that Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter, it may be about someone having ideas, wanting to do things, feeling it's very important to do something, being very insistent. And I would think that in that kind of situation, you should probably hold your ground. People can be convincing. People might be very insistent, but particularly on Saturday, Aries, you have to be strong. And yeah, you can enjoy yourself, but it has to be on your terms. And if other people wants to do something that you're not comfortable with, then just brush them aside or tell them to grow up or whatever. You'll be able to manage it. It's not a time to be reasonable. It's not a weekend for being reasonable or for compromise. It's all about you, because you know best. And I think in most cases, Aries, you know best for everyone. Taurus, it's probably a weekend, especially on Saturday, where you're going to be in the mood for just perhaps staying in one place. You won't feel that anything necessarily has to be done, but you may feel also that your way is the right way. That's especially on Saturday, although I think if you're in Australia and New Zealand, that may actually cover the whole weekend. So there is scope here for being quite stubborn, because what we've got Uranus is of course moving through Taurus. It's been moving through Taurus for years, and the moon is making a square to Uranus. And with that moon square Uranus Taurus, you could be just very focused on who you are and what you want and what your plans are. And I don't think you're going to be particularly in the mood for listening to other people. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful, because on Saturday we have a sesquiquadrate aspect between Venus and Jupiter. Now, Venus is your ruler. Jupiter is the planet of excess, taking things too far, just enjoying things too much. And sesquiquadrate, it's a tense aspect, can be difficult. And so on Saturday, you need to understand what your limits are. And just because things aren't entirely going your way, it doesn't mean to say that you have to go over the top. It's not a time for example, cheering yourself up with over expenditure, or cheering yourself up by insisting on going to lots of parties. That would be a really bad idea, because you're just not in the mood for that, really. I mean, fundamentally, you might think you're in the mood, but you're not really in the mood for it. I don't think large-scale socializing might seem attractive, but it's not going to work. I don't think you're going to feel comfortable. And Moon square Uranus can also be quite disruptive, especially for you in the home environment. So I suppose the issue is that if you spend all your time at home, which I think is the right place for you to be, especially on Saturday, you might still feel a bit frustrated, and you might feel you have to do something, and the things you do may not always work out well. So on Saturday, I think it's just important to be quite responsible, and perhaps to take advantage of the good things going on Saturday. For example, there is the moon is making a sextile to Jupiter on Saturday, and that moon sextile Jupiter, I would have said, is pretty fortunate, and it can be quite responsible, and it perhaps gives you insights into money and perhaps what can be done with money. See, there are two ways this moon sextile Jupiter could work. Jupiter is a planet of excess, so moon sextile Jupiter might encourage you to spend money, particularly as Venus is sesquiquadrate Jupiter. But it might also encourage you to look at money in a constructive, okay, not a serious way, but a constructive way, and perhaps seeing what can be done with money, and perhaps looking at your money again, looking at ways of making money, and perhaps with Moon sextile Jupiter, if you need extra money, there may be a way you can discover on Saturday of perhaps finding extra money or finding a way of earning extra money, something like that. Now, on Sunday, it sort of depends on your time zone. If you are in Europe, the Americas, the moon does change sign from Leo to Virgo. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, the sign change happens very late in the day. And so I think that if you're in Australia or New Zealand, I think it is perhaps a weekend for maybe just staying in one place, all weekend. But if you're in Australia and New Zealand, as the moon moves into Virgo, you may feel your horizons starting to increase. You may feel less trapped, and new possibilities start to emerge with the moon moving into Virgo. And of course, as the moon moves into Virgo, it starts making a sextile to Venus, because the moon is in Virgo, which is in sextile aspect to Venus in Scorpio, and you see new possibilities. And some of those new possibilities may relate to another person, possibly, but they may also be about you taking a serious approach to what you can do well, because there are things you can do well, and I think the moon moving into Virgo will encourage Taurians to really make the most of what they've got, and to make the most of their abilities. So that does look good. But the weekend overall, I think that main points would be that you do have to make sure that you're comfortable where you are, and just because you're in one place doesn't mean that you have to be frustrated. You have to accept the world as it is, and the world by definition has limitations, and I think this weekend you're very aware of these limitations, and don't be annoyed by these limitations. It's all part of the process, and by understanding these limitations, you start to actually get a sense of your own ability to express yourself in a way that is unique to you. Gemini, Mercury is getting quite close to the South Node. I don't think it gets there quite this weekend. It gets very close, but we do have this conjunction between Mercury and the Sun and the South Node, and so Gemini, you perhaps need to make sure that you don't go back over past ground. Gemini should be a forward-looking sign, thinking about the future and the possibilities of the future. And if you go back, that might be a mistake. I understand it can be fun going back to places and people you haven't seen for ages. It might satisfy your curiosity, and perhaps you want to talk to someone you haven't talked to for 20 years. But I'm not sure if that's the right approach. I think if you go back, you'll be making a mistake. And remember that just because something was fun 20 years ago, it doesn't mean that it's going to be fun right now. And so don't be tempted. It's not fun. It's not going to take, well, it might be fun in the short term. It might be fun in the sense that it's your line of least resistance. And there are quite a lot of lines of least resistance, Gemini, today. There are things that are easy. And usually the easiest route right now is almost certainly the most dangerous route. And so, Gemini, I think you have to make a special effort to resist for temptation, and perhaps also understand, with Mercury moving towards a conjunction of the Sun, that your judgment is not 100%. Something is clouding your judgment, and perhaps you are misunderstanding things, you're reading things, you're seeing things, and it seems to make sense to you. You've got this wonderful idea about how things are going to work, and it all makes sense, and you seem to have got all the facts together, but maybe you've got something wrong. Maybe it's not as clear as it looks. And so, Gemini, I kind of think a certain amount of discipline is required. And another thing to point out, Gemini, is that Mercury is aspecting the Mars-Neptune midpoint. So Mercury is your ruler, it's aspecting the Mars-Neptune midpoint. Mars-Neptune as a pair can be quite deceptive. They can lead you in places that you don't necessarily want to go. And I like to associate Mars and Neptune with sleaze, with criminality, with alcohol, with drugs, with doing things that can seem fun and glamorous, but in fact are not, which they could actually be self-destructive. So just because something glitters doesn't mean that you should run after it, because if you do run after it, you could get yourself into trouble very quickly. But Gemini, remember, I'm a Gemini. I'm talking to myself as well. It's not just you. And I'm not just trying to make you feel bad or trying to make you feel paranoid, or perhaps I'm just making myself feel paranoid. But don't go chasing things. It's not a good idea. And by all means be creative, but just be creative in a way that is forward-looking. What worked in the past is not necessarily going to work in the future. So, yeah, sorry to say that. I mean, I prefer to have a more upbeat message, but I suppose on a positive note, you can think about things which are dangerous. You can research things about things that are dangerous, but you just don't want to get involved with them. It's got to be a theoretical exercise. You don't want to be right there in the middle of the sleaze, because you might not get out. And as the weekend progresses, the moon changes sign. The moon moves from Leo to Virgo. Okay, it doesn't change sign if you're in Australia or New Zealand, at least not until Sunday evening, but the moon moves from Leo to Virgo. And I would have thought, as the moon moves into Virgo, probably you're going to start to calm down a little. There's going to be a little more space for relaxation and common sense. So I would have said that Sunday is a quieter day than Saturday. Again, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand. But Sunday does seem quieter than Saturday. Saturday, there was some excitement. And, Saturday, by the way, I should have mentioned, on Saturday, the moon is sextile Jupiter. Moon sextile Jupiter on Saturday. Yeah, there are temptations, but moon sextile Jupiter is an opportunity as well. So there's something wholesome that you can get involved with on Saturday, and wholesome and fortunate, and something which allows you to show off your genius in a way that is very constructive and is helpful and is life-affirming. But yeah, Sunday, I think that things do start to quieten down. Cancer, the weekend is divided between the moon being in Leo and the moon being in Virgo. Well, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand, in which case the moon is pretty much in Leo all weekend. But for the average Cancerian, Saturday, okay, when I say average Cancerian, I'm not trying to say that Cancerians in Australia and New Zealand are not average. I'm just saying Cancerians in Europe and the Americas and the Middle East and Africa, it's going to be more about Saturday being about Moon in Leo and Sunday being about Moon in Virgo. So on Saturday, I think that you are quite concerned by what you have. I mean, what you have does matter. And I think that you are going to really want to make sure that you're able to hold on to what you have. And issues relating to money could be quite important to you. And things, if your belongings are being compromised, or you think they're being compromised, you're going to want to take action. Especially with Moon sextile Uranus, Moon square Uranus on Saturday. Things relating to money and belongings could be the cause of upset and argument and confusion and people being very stubborn about it. Then, as you move into Sunday, I do think that things start to calm down. When the moon moves out of Leo, if you're in Australia, if you're in the Americas or in Europe, when the moon moves out of Leo into Virgo, perhaps things start to calm down. I think that Sundays would be, a calmer day when you can be less concerned about other people's behavior. You might feel that you can just be yourself, say what you want. There's no pressure. If you want to do something, you can. If you don't want to do it, well, that's fine. Now, there is something going on which may affect Cancerians wherever they are, and that is Mars moving on to Sirius. So Mars is already in your star sign, and so with Mars moving on to Sirius, which is the dog star, you could say that this does, I think, make you quite strong. I think you are a strong person over the weekend, and Mars conjunct Sirius does give you a sense of self, and I think it just gives you a sense of responsibility. Particularly when we're looking at the Vivian Robeson book, talking about, use this word custodian. And I mean, I think the concept of custodian is important for all 12 signs, but I think it could be particularly important for Cancerians, simply because many Cancerians actually regard themselves as being custodians. That's very much a Cancerian word almost. You are looking after your home, your family. You're aware of your responsibilities. The clan, the group can be important to Cancerians. I mean, group as in the clan. Clan is a very Cancerian concept. There are people you are loyal to, and whatever that clan is, whatever those connections are, you're going to really want to look after them, and you're going to want to address any threats. So I think that Mars conjunct Sirius makes you strong and responsible, and perhaps you're aware that you do actually have some ability to command. If something is important, you can issue commands, and you shouldn't be afraid of making commands if something needs to be done and you feel there's some urgency. The temptation is to keep quiet and to just look the other way and take the view that you don't have any responsibility. But yes, you do have responsibility. And I think that Mars conjunct Sirius is a reminder that you do have power and you do have the ability to not just make things happen, but to really get people to listen to you. Leo, the Sun is conjunct the South Node. Now, the Sun does conjunct the South Node every year, so it's not a particularly unusual combination or an unusual aspect, Sun conjunct the South Node, but it is something that you do need to be aware of when it happens. And all things being equal, I would have probably said that Sun conjunct the Sun's South Node is not especially fortunate, because the Sun is actually not in a very good position right now, because the Sun is in Libra. The Sun is fallen in Libra, and it is conjunct the South Node. So the South Node is of the nature of Saturn, at least in Western astrology. So there's something about you that is not on good form. And the South Node is also connected with reputation, and it can be connected with bad reputation. So there are things you might do or not do that could undermine your reputation, could undermine the respect that people have for you. And respect is, of course, very important, but you perhaps have to see yourself in a public role, ask yourself what people think of you. And if there's something you do which is not right, perhaps you're too concerned about getting attention, or perhaps you're in a state of mind where you feel you have to say something, and something you say may be absolutely inappropriate. So consider the possibility that your overall position is not particularly strong this weekend. And, I'm not saying that it's going to be a bad weekend. I just think it's going to be very important that you're aware of your weaknesses. And it's going to be very important that you don't go back. It might be easy to go back. Perhaps you want to go back to something because, you want to have one last look at it. Maybe there's a certain sense of nostalgia. Maybe you feel the past is better than the present and almost certainly better than the future. Maybe that's what you think, but it's really not a time to be going back. There's a danger that you go back into past ways of thinking, and these past ways of thinking may not be remotely constructive. So do consider all of this. And I think in some ways it's natural, because we move in a particular direction and we're comfortable moving in a particular direction and we are making progress, but every now and then we stop, we pause, and when we stop and pause, we're perhaps at risk, and there is a temptation to look back, and that's a temptation that I think it's very important for you to resist. Now, if we can be positive about this, what can move you forward? Well, on Saturday, the moon is moving through Leo, and in fact, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is actually moving through Leo the whole weekend pretty much until Sunday evening. But on Saturday, certainly Saturday, the moon is moving through Leo. It's in your sign, and it's making a square to Uranus. Now, that square to Uranus, it should be seen as something potentially disruptive, but it's about perhaps reminding you that you've got to always think about the future. And if you want to move towards the future, you may have to deal with a certain amount of disruption. Disruption is a way to move forward. It's not easy having to stop what you're doing and because you have to respond to a new event, but it's moving you forward, and it's getting you over the line, and it's getting you further and further away from the past. And I suppose you could almost see it as a danger. The past could be like could be like a swamp. You get involved in the past and it's just difficult to get out of the past, and perhaps you need to sort of shock yourself to move forward. And so, you can just you can just keep moving forward. Perhaps you need a bit of a surprise. Perhaps you need to expose yourself to new information, things that are challenging, and all the while you're moving further and further away from the past. And that is certainly something that I think that you should be doing. So there is a challenge, and I think that today is all about how you manage the past. And if you can do that, I think that you'll be fine. Now, on a positive note, I mean, I've been sort of a little bit, I won't say philosophical, but am I ever philosophical? But there is a sextile between the moon and Jupiter on Saturday, and that sextile, Moon in Leo, sextile Jupiter in Gemini, that's a very fortunate aspect. I think that does give you a chance to enjoy yourself. I think that there are people who you can enjoy yourself with. And if you are socializing on Saturday, try to socialize with people you don't know very well. You don't want to socialize with people from the past, obviously. You don't want reminders. You don't want a get-together. You don't want a reunion on Saturday. You should avoid, at the moment, you should be avoiding reunions at all costs. Might sound a good idea for old time's sake and all that kind of thing, but no, reunions are a negative right now. You need to be thinking about new people who can offer you new information and new experiences and a new outlook. So that's what you should be doing, and that's how you should be, I think, managing this weekend. Virgo, the moon actually moves into your sign this weekend. Quite when it moves into your sign does depend on your time zone. If you're in the Americas, it moves into Virgo sort of early on Sunday. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it will be very late on Sunday. So it kind of depends. But I think in a way, it's a bit of a relief that the moon is moving into Virgo, because you've had the moon, you've had the moon in Leo for the last couple of days, and I think that with the moon in Leo, you felt that you weren't 100% yourself, and you perhaps felt that there was a world out there that you didn't entirely trust. And so on Saturday, as the moon moves through the last degrees of Virgo, it may be a time to reflect, but also I think it will be a time of optimism where you can feel that you're just coming to the end of something. And the moon does make a square of Uranus on Saturday, and I think that moon square Uranus may give you some insights that sort of come from nowhere, and these insights could be very informative. They could give you an idea about what your next move is. And I think on Saturday the work is solo. I don't think that you want to get heavily involved with other people. And I think that you have to also be aware, Virgo, that there are a few temptations around over the weekend. I think especially on Saturday. No, in fact, I would have said the whole weekend there could be temptations. If something seems interesting but dangerous, then you perhaps should be careful about it. It could lead you in the wrong direction. So perhaps, Virgo, you need to think what your plan is. So have a plan for the weekend, especially Sunday, but Saturday as well. But have a plan for the weekend. And if you stick to the plan, you should be fine. But if something happens that seems interesting and you want to know more about it, but you don't entirely trust it, then I think that you should hold back. So I think it's very important to be responsible and always bear in mind that you might be mistaken. Because Mercury, which is your ruler, is now getting very close to the sun, and it's actually close to the south node. So Mercury conjunct the sun is about being combust. You can't see the full picture, and you might think you can see the full picture. You might think everything makes sense, but actually it doesn't make sense at all. And you have perhaps got things completely wrong. And I'm just trying to think, where would this be the biggest issue? I think with money you have to be careful, actually. If you're thinking about money and you've got ideas about money, or you're being told things about money, then you may be being deceived. And just because you've got a wonderful idea of a financial nature doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good idea. So do avoid making financial decisions over the weekend. And at the same time, with the sun making a conjunction to the south node, and Mercury is also making a conjunction to the south node, the past is strong, and you might be thinking about the past and thinking that maybe the past was better than the future, and it's better than where you are now, and you might want to go back to the past, and you might even in some ways want to spend money going back to the past. I'm quite not sure why you would want to do that, but you might. Something about your expenditure could be a representation of your own nostalgia, feeling that if you spend money you can go back. Of course you can't go back. It's just simply not possible. But and also with your thinking, what are you thinking about over the weekend? And I think that perhaps your memories are going to be strong over the weekend. You will be thinking about the past more than usual over the weekend. And it's nice to remember the past sometimes. It can actually be something one absolutely wants to avoid. One doesn't want to think about the past. But it's not the way forward. And it might feel comfortable, the past. I think that's true. It will feel comfortable, the past. But you somehow have to be able to let go of it and move into something else. And perhaps you have to make some kind of transition. And you have perhaps recently been afraid of making a transition because it seems scary. You are just concerned about what the future might bring. But once you're able to make that transition, you'll realize that things are just so much easier. You'll realize that it is actually the right thing to do. And with the moon moving into Virgo on Sunday, it might be late on Sunday if it's Australia, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then with the moon moving into Virgo, this should give you a chance to move forward. Now, it's not about moving backwards. You could move backwards, but you're going to want to move one way or the other, I think, on Sunday and into Monday. Are you going to go forward or are you going to go backwards? I think you have to go forward and not think. I know you have to go forward. And you have to start addressing the future and the challenges of the future. And you need to sort of start looking forward to next week and what you can do next week. And it should be seen as being a brand new world. That's how you've got to see it. If it's new, it's probably good. If it represents a future, it's probably good. If it's old, it should probably be avoided. If it's something from the past, if it's something you used to enjoy, then again, I think it should be avoided. Libra. I think, Libra, that Saturday is probably going to be a more active day than Sunday. On Saturday, the moon is moving through Leo. It makes a sextile to Jupiter. And with that moon sextile Jupiter, I think that you're going to be sort of quite happy and optimistic. And I think that you can enjoy people's company up to a point. And you just may feel that you can just sort of relax and take advantage of everything that's on offer and just be yourself, and everything's fine. Then as you move into Sunday, okay, not so much if you're in Australia and New Zealand, because I think on Australia and New Zealand, I think that the moon is moving through Leo all weekend, if you're in Australia and New Zealand. But if you're in the Americas or Europe, as you move into Sunday, things are likely to slow down a little. I think that it will be a time perhaps of reflection, and you may feel that the excitement that used to exist or did exist on Saturdays, things are starting to calm down, and there may not be so many opportunities, and maybe you have a chance to enjoy the solitude. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to be completely alone. I mean, in fact, when the moon moves into Virgo on Sunday, it starts to make a sextile to Venus, and I suppose that's moon sextile Venus does indicate that there are going to be people to interact with, but it's going to be different. I think it's going to be sort of more serious. Now, there are other things going on, and possibly the big event of the weekend is a conjunction between the Sun and the South Node in Libra. And so, yeah, it's in your sign, Sun conjunct South Node. And I don't think that this Sun conjunct South Node is necessarily particularly helpful. Now, there are different ways of looking at the South Node. Now, you could just see the South Node as being part of the North-South Node axis. So it's just about just people in general, contacts. So you could say Sun conjunct South Node. There are people to be in contact with, lots of people to be in contact with, even on Sunday, or when the moon moves into Virgo. Quite a sort of introspective, secretive sign from a Libran perspective. But even then, there are contacts, and so that's one way of looking at it. But it might also be a representation of the past, and the fact that perhaps with Sun conjunct South Node, you may be overly concerned about the past, or perhaps doing things because they're easy. You don't want to stress yourself out. You don't want to do things that are difficult. You want to do what is easiest. And very often what is easiest is doing things that are familiar, things that you are just completely comfortable with. But just because something is easy doesn't mean that it's a good thing. And so, at the very least, over the weekend, you just may feel that you just don't want to stretch yourself. You don't see what the point is. If you've got a choice between doing something that is easy and difficult, why would you want to do the thing that is difficult? But I think with the Sun conjunct the South Node, there is a suggestion that you should be focusing on what is hard, and that might include how you manage your social life. Yeah, sure, you can talk to someone that you've known for decades and it's all going to be very easy. Or you can try to meet people you don't know, even people you're a bit wary of, you're a bit afraid of. They seem to be in some way superior to you, or they seem to hold all the cards. But a bit of social bravery on your part this weekend might actually be something that you should do. I not say should do, but at least you should consider doing it. Stretching yourself socially. And not just socially, in all areas, doing things that are future orientated. Yeah, the future is always difficult. The future is always a bit stressful because we just don't know. But if you can push yourself, and I think if you give people the chance, then they will help you push yourself. So it's important over the weekend, Libra, that you are not complacent. And if you were to do things that were just easy, if you were to take the line of least resistance, the line of least resistance, would you actually be satisfied? And I think the answer is absolutely not. You're going to feel deep down that it's not right, that you're not accepting the reality of the world that you live in. And that's something you just need to do. Accept the world for what it is, and accept its limitations, and accept its demands as well. And I know you don't necessarily want to accept those demands, but I think that is something actually that you probably should do. So, I'm sorry to be a little bit judgmental. I mean, I don't mean to be judgmental. He who is without sin forever to cast the first stone and all that kind of stuff. But that's perhaps one aspect of what this weekend is about. And I think that hopefully by Sunday, perhaps into Monday, there will be a time for reflection, and you can start to sort of realign yourself, and that's always a good thing to do. When the sun is in Libra, when the sun is in your sign, overall it's a good thing that the sun is in Libra. And of course, if you're looking at this from a perspective of your sun sign, I know people come to this from a perspective of the moon sign or the ascendant sign, but if you're coming at it from the sun sign perspective, of course, it's your birthday month. And so perhaps with this sun conjunct south node, it's like a question of choice. You have to decide at what stage are you going to move forward? Are you going to stay in one place forever? Or perhaps you're going to say, well, this is the month, this is the Libra month, this is the month which I'm going to make the big change. And don't discount your ability to be strong and powerful, provided you're future orientated, because we do have Mars conjunct Sirius. So Mars is in Cancer. Cancer is a high profile sign in the Libran chart. Mars is on Sirius, the dog star. This is Sirius is a fixed star that can be connected with preferment. It can be about leadership, and this is something you can do if you're so inclined and if you have the opportunity. And maybe it's not just about you being a little too concerned with the past. It's about perhaps other people being concerned with the past, and perhaps, as with Mars conjunct Sirius, this perhaps gives you an opportunity to move everyone forward, not just yourself. Scorpio, Mars is conjunct Sirius, as I was just telling Libra. So Sirius is a very important star. It's the dog star. I think the ancient Egyptians regarded Sirius as being absolutely critical. So what Mars conjunct Sirius actually means is it's about action, it's about leadership, it can be connected with the successful general. Now, I'm not saying you have to go to war this weekend, but still, generalship in a sort of a symbolic level might be important. I mean, there were some generals who were Scorpio. Rommel, he was a Scorpio. But it is about leadership, and you have to perhaps decide where everyone should be going and what kind of signals you should be giving. And this perhaps puts you in a position of some trust. You can make things happen, and so people are going to listen to you. And so where do you want to take things? And that is a choice you have to make, or perhaps you have to make. And Mars is not just conjunct Sirius. It's actually starting to make a trine to Saturn. So, I'm getting a sense here that you do actually have a certain amount of responsibility, and as well as leadership. And so, you could argue, Scorpio, that of all the 12 signs over the weekend, you may be the most powerful of them all. So, yeah, that does give you responsibility. And it's not just that. When you look at the heliocentric chart, putting things, when you put the sun at the center of the solar system, we find we've got a grand trine. We've got involving Mars, your ruler. So Mars is trine Mercury. Mars is trine Pluto. So this again gives us the idea, Scorpio, that you're someone who can really make things happen. So, consider your world. And I understand that, your world has its limits. It doesn't matter what it is. And there are, you have limits to what opportunities you have. You can't do everything. Obviously, you can't necessarily go to war. But whatever your world is, there is a scope there for pushing it to the limit, for asserting your power as much as you possibly can, given whatever limitations you're working with. So in that sense, I think that you perhaps have your work cut out. I think there is a certain responsibility to make things happen. Now, we should perhaps also consider what might go wrong, what might stop you from achieving the potential of this weekend. And I think what could go wrong is that you might get caught up in your own and other people's chaos. You might just get involved in things that you don't fully understand, and it's all not properly defined, and because of that, you don't achieve your potential. So this means that at an earliest stage, as early as possible in the weekend, you do need to make sure that everything is clear. All the stuff that could confuse and distract you needs to go, needs to be put to one side, so that you've really got a clear working space. And not just a clear working space, a clear thinking space. It's all got to be clear. And you don't want to have any distractions. You don't want to have people around who are making stupid demands. You don't want to have to deal with the minutiae of other people's lives and other people's mess. That's not what you want. It all needs to be clear, because in that way, you're going to be able to have the absolute best chance of making things happen. And it's not just about you. It is about other people, the world around you. You have this role to play this weekend, and if you give yourself the best chance, then I think it's a role that you are going to be very suited to, and I think that you can very much surprise to the upside. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you don't want to waste too much time on other people, and I think it would be a bad idea to spend, for example, a lot of time going to parties or gatherings or socializing. I mean, it's tempting, but I'm not convinced it would work out. I think you would actually feel a certain sense of dissatisfaction, that you would kind of rather be somewhere else. So if in doubt, in terms of social opportunities, if in doubt, say no. You don't need to have your life overwhelmed and cluttered by other people. It might seem fun, but I don't think it's going to work out. And matters are not helped by the fact that on Saturday we have got a sesquiquadrate between Venus and Jupiter. Now it sounds nice, Venus-Jupiter sesquiquadrate, but Jupiter's your ruler. Venus is making a stressful aspect to Jupiter. So other people and their problems could could just slow you down, and yeah, they could waste your time. And so instead, Sagittarius, concentrate on things that are real and are very much part of your experience, not a part of someone else's experience. It's you that matters, and it's also your creativity that matters. It's what you do well. It's not what other people do well. Other people may want to talk about what their plans are, their ideas, but you don't have to be interested in it. Well, unless it's relevant to what you are doing. So that's where the focus should be. And I should also point out that Mercury is conjunct the Sun and Mercury is conjunct the South Node. Mercury does have a connection with other people in the Sagittarian chart because Mercury rules Gemini, your opposite sign. And so with Mercury conjunct the Sun and Mercury conjunct the South Node, it's absolutely possible that if you listen to people, they're going to really be a major distraction. They're going to be taking you in the wrong direction, and they're going to perhaps be taking you into places that are familiar but also just completely boring and completely unsatisfying. So it all has to be done according to your rules and your expectations, and just listen to yourself. I just don't think that you need anyone else. I think that's something that you really do need to bear in mind. Now, also, as you move into Sunday, the moon moves from Leo to Virgo. And so with the moon moving into Virgo on Sunday, okay, I understand it might not move into Virgo until very late on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but with the moon moving into Virgo on Sunday, I think that does actually give you more focus, and it gives you a sense of what the future looks like. When I say the future, I'm thinking more about the short-term future, perhaps what the next week or two look like. You have a sense of what the next couple of weeks looks like, and in particular, what you would like to happen over the next couple of weeks. So, in a way, Sagittarius, the new week perhaps starts on Sunday. Of course, I never know when the week starts. I mean, some people say the week starts on Sunday and other people say it starts on Monday. I generally take the view that the week starts on Monday. But I think for you, the week does start on Sunday. Sunday is a point of departure with the moon moving into Virgo, and I think that you're going to be able to start to align yourself with the challenges of the future, and you certainly don't need anyone wasting your time. Capricorn, you do actually have a fair amount of power at your disposal. It's not power that is entirely obvious. I mean, you get a sense of it, but it's not immediately there until you need it. And when you need it, it will be right there for you, and you're going to be able to just bring to bear a huge amount of energy, if need be. So, Capricorn, do not be a defeatist over the weekend. Don't think that you have no choices. Don't think that perhaps other people are in a stronger position than you. That's not the case. When you need to, you can just change everything, and you can really show the world what you can do and who you are. And in the process, you might be quite surprised. People might be surprised. And of course, what's happening is that you're bringing to bear this sort of energy, this sort of universal energy that you actually have access to at the moment, and you can bring it down to earth, and you can make it happen in the world around you. But of course, it may be the case that you don't need to use this force, and instead, you might be able to focus on things in a sort of more sort of relaxed way. Now, one thing happening over the weekend is that there is a conjunction between the Sun and the South Node. And this conjunction between the Sun and the South Node, from a Capricorn perspective, is perhaps somewhat complex. So the Sun is in Libra at the moment. And in some respects, from a Capricorn perspective, it's very nice for the Sun to be in Libra. Libra is a sign in the Capricorn horoscope that is connected with advancement, career, ambitions, status, and also the mother, by the way. So with the Sun in Libra, you apparently do have a relatively good sense of where you're going. Of course, the Sun is always in Libra at this time of year. But with the Sun conjunct the South Node, there may be a certain tendency here to perhaps do things in a way on autopilot. When you're planning your next move, maybe you're not fully planning your next move. You are kind of going on autopilot. You're doing what feels easiest. And I'm never going to accuse a Capricorn of being lazy, because Capricorn is the least lazy of the 12 signs, surely. But it's just easiest to do what seems natural. And when I say lazy, I'm perhaps suggesting you don't feel it's necessary to really think about what you're doing because it's so obvious. But nothing is entirely obvious. And so, Capricorn, I think you need to turn off the autopilot. Not just this weekend, but as you move into next week. And you need to actually think about where you're going and what you're planning, because I think you've made some assumptions somewhere along the line. And what you've actually done is you're using the past as your guide. Now, we all do this. I mean, it's the way humans work. We run according to scripts. It's a long time ago when I was doing a psychology degree, I remember I had to do a course in cognitive psychology. In cognitive psychology, they talked about scripts and how we have scripts. If we were to process everything all the time, it would drive us crazy. So we have shortcuts. We have shortcuts in terms of identifying things. We don't identify things from bottom down. We make assumptions, and that's part of being human. But you need to kind of move away from those scripts if you possibly can, and not allow the past to determine the future. Perhaps because there are challenges coming up. Okay, I don't necessarily mean challenges. It could be opportunities as well. But there are challenges and perhaps opportunities coming up as well that need you to behave off script, not to be influenced by how you did things in the past. You have to actually look at it, how you're dealing with it. You have to regard everything as potentially as being a new situation. And so I think that's how you manage the Sun conjunct the South Node. You understand the temptations to be influenced by the past, but at the same time, you don't restrict your opportunities. You don't say, well, I'm not going to do that because that reminds me too much of the past. You see every opportunity as being new and with its own rules which have to be discovered. Because the rules of the past are not necessarily going to work. So I think that makes some sense. Now, we shouldn't forget that the 10th house, the Capricorn 10th house, covered by Libra, does potentially relate to the mother. Mothers are important. Mothers are important even if they're long dead. And So Sun conjunct South Node, Mercury conjunct the South Node. There may be things going on relating to your mother, again, even if she's long dead, and you're perhaps thinking about the past. Now I've kind of seen the South Node in the sort of quite negative way, but the South Node could just be the past in a neutral way, and perhaps looking at one's relationship to one's mother and what kind of impact she has had, or indeed what kind of impact she is having if she is still alive. And so that might be something to think about, and perhaps to think about your mother, your relationship with your mother, how you're different, how perhaps you need to break away from some of the things that your mother represents. So that is a possible psychological interpretation of the Sun conjunct the South Node. Aquarius. Aquarius, Saturday, the moon is in Leo, and Sunday, the moon is in Virgo, unless you're in East Asia, Australia or New Zealand, in which case for most of Sunday the moon will also be in Leo. But certainly on Saturday, I think that there could be continued emphasis on relationships, because Leo is your opposite sign, and the moon is making a square to Uranus. So relationships could be a little bit of an issue here. It may be that with the moon is in a fixed sign in Leo, and of course Uranus is in a fixed sign in Taurus. So with that fixity, it may be difficult to compromise in terms of you and other people. They're very certain about their views, their opinions. They're very certain about what they want to do. But you, by the same token, you're an Aquarian. You're quite stubborn about it, and so it may be difficult to come to an agreement on Saturday. And so maybe it's a situation where you perhaps shouldn't try, and instead you should just do what you want to do. And if other people want to join you, that would be great. If they don't want to join you, it's not a problem. And I suppose part of that is because the moon is making a sextile to Jupiter. So that's a fortunate aspect, of course, moon sextile Jupiter. So moon in Leo, your opposite sign on Saturday, where it is on Saturday, making a sextile to Jupiter. And that's a nice sextile. It's quite creative, it's forward thinking, and that does indicate that maybe you can do things which are interesting and exciting and a reflection of who you are. And yeah, and if other people want to join you, then that's fine. Sunday, I think that things do change a bit. I think that on Sunday, things do become slowly more serious, and I think that you're less inclined to take into account other people. I don't think the temptation is even there. I think it's like you feel that, things are important, and there are things you want to think about, and it's going to be very difficult to tempt you on Sunday. And the moon, when it moves into a Virgo, it does actually in the end make a sextile to Venus. So I think that you're prepared to take people seriously if they are serious themselves. I don't think you're going to want to take people seriously if they're frivolous. Now, another thing going on this weekend is that we have the Sun conjunct South Node. Now, that also says something about relationships. And Sun conjunct South Node, if we take the Sun as being ruler of Leo, then you could take the Sun as a representative of the other person, of the partner. and with Sun conjunct South Node, does seem that some people are going in the wrong direction, and there may actually be a bad influence on you. And it's not a good weekend for following. If you follow someone's advice, if you follow someone's lead, I'm not convinced it's going to go in the right direction. I think that you could be sorry. It might feel easy, though, to follow someone, particularly if they're following you, if you're following them onto familiar territory. I mean, we all like familiar territory. Even Aquarians like familiar territory. But things that are familiar, particularly connected with other people, are things that are dangerous. You might think you know it, but things have changed. And so familiar ground is not what it seems. I think the thing is that if you move onto non-familiar ground, you're on edge. You know that you have to be careful. And because you're careful, you don't make mistakes. When you're on familiar ground, you get complacent. And yeah, some people, they do want to lead you onto familiar ground. And it may well be that there are a couple of people this weekend that you need to studiously avoid. Okay, maybe you can get back in touch in a week's time or so, but right for the moment, I do think that they actually do need to be avoided. And it's going to be very important, Aquarius, that you think for yourself. Now, I know, Aquarius, you'd probably say that you always think for yourself, but that's not necessarily the case. None of us always think for ourselves. Some of us feel we need help, we need advice, we need to get an alternative opinion, but this weekend you need to work it out on your own. You need to gather the facts on your own, and that way you are responsible, and you're responsible if things go wrong. Because if you gather the facts on your own and things go wrong, you can go back to your own working, and you can see where you went wrong, and you can make adjustments. If you take someone else's advice and something goes wrong, you're stuck, because you don't know why you're wrong. You don't know what the basis of the advice you were given actually was. So it's all a complete mess. So I think, Aquarius, you do have to be very self-reliant. I do think that that's important. But you can make things happen. You don't need other people to make things happen. And you are, in your own way, I think that you are strongly placed to create change, and it's a change that relates to the future and moving into the future. And I think that that's something that you are going to be comfortable with as soon as you get going. And so it's just very important that you don't underestimate yourself. Yeah, that really does matter. Pisces, the moon is at some stage going to move into Virgo. At some time on Sunday moves into the moon moves into Virgo. And so with the moon moving into Virgo, you are going to perhaps feel that you need to take into account of what's happening outside your own city limits. City limits. Is every Pisces a city? So outside the limits of yourself, outside your own boundaries, you can't be in full control. And I think that that's what Moon and Virgo perhaps is all about. So that's perhaps something you need to prepare for. So don't think you have to do everything on your own, and also just consider the way outside events are going to be able to influence you. But don't take things too seriously. And there is a temptation to do that, to be taking things too seriously. Pisces can regard the world as being incredibly complicated, incredibly deep, powerful emotions, and you can get overwhelmed by these powerful emotions, and so much so that you just get completely lost. And so perhaps what you need to do, Pisces, over the weekend is to keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible. And if you don't understand something, then don't bother with it. If you don't understand something, don't think that it's because you're stupid, and don't let someone else explain it to you, unless they explain it to you in such a way that you really do understand it. So keep your actions and your decisions to the understandable. And if you don't understand something, it's not your problem. It means that something probably isn't right for you. So be direct, and it's going to be very important that you ask questions, and don't be afraid of asking simple questions, because sometimes the simple questions can make everything actually clear. And also, Pisces, we've got Mars moving towards a trine of Saturn, and I think that Mars trine Saturn, that Saturn is of course in your sign, and so that Mars trine Saturn perhaps allows you to be assertive, to be very clear about what you want and how you want things to be done. And you also should have a serious approach to enjoyment and entertainment. Enjoyment and entertainment are not trivial pursuits. They're not something that are sort of take it or leave it at the moment. You enjoy something, you're entertained by something, because it's really fundamentally you. It has its roots in yourself. It's not about having something having its roots in other people. It's not something you just take it or leave it. You enjoy something for 5 minutes and then you move on to something else. I think you need to be really quite sincere about it, about how you are entertaining yourself. And on Saturday, we have the moon in late Leo making a sextile to Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler, remember? And so this is perhaps also about seriousness and entertainment coming together. It's just about feeling a sense of self and also feeling a great sense of your own satisfaction, and real satisfaction, not trivial satisfaction. And it's going to then be important that you don't scatter your energies, that you don't move from one thing to another. You don't feel that you have to go out of your way to be amused. Amusement is wherever you are. You don't have to go somewhere to enjoy yourself. You don't have to go to some venue because this particular venue is the only place to have fun. Well, that is, of course, not true. If the more effort you have to put in terms of enjoying yourself, if you have to, by effort, I mean having to go somewhere, having to organize something, having to engage other people, then it's just not going to work, is it? It's got to be real. And that is the essence of who you are. Keeping it real, keeping it very focused on yourself, and then I think you really are going to feel a sense of satisfaction that can almost sort of have a spirituality to it. And now I want to move away from the 12 signs, and I want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend of Saturday the 28th and 29th of September going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 42, which is increase. So this hexagram is about things increasing, and it's about good things increasing. And the advice given by the I Ching is that, if something is good, we need to bring it into our life, and we need to perhaps imitate it. If we see someone doing something which is good and is life affirming, we should bring it into our lives, and we should make it part of who we are. And at the same time, if something is not working well, if it's perhaps a representative of the past, then perhaps we should let go of it. And I suppose this is happening at the time, this weekend, the Sun is conjunct the South Node, and perhaps this is giving us more information about about the hexagram. The Sun is conjunct the South Node, but it's also opposition the North Node, and perhaps the challenge is to look at the past and say goodbye to the past. And if we say goodbye to the past, we are letting go of things that aren't working out anymore for us, and we are, by the same token, embracing the future. So Sun conjunct the South Node has a positive side to it. It's about bringing something new into our life, increasing the good, and the good perhaps represents what we should be developing in the future. So overall, increase can be about increase of knowledge. It can be about increase of knowledge. It can be increase of experience. It's a time perhaps to be generous. I'm not saying giving away loads of money, but perhaps being a generosity of spirit, and not being cluttered by the past. Now, there are two moving lines here, and the second line moves and the fourth line moves. So the second line is inviting us to work hard, to persevere at increasing whatever we have. Whatever we have that is good needs to be increased. And if we don't feel that we can do it on our own, then there's absolutely no harm in getting help. So we can get other people's help in order to develop whatever we're trying to develop. Increase, I suppose you could say it's making more money, but it could be, it could be working in the garden, it could be growing plants, it could be, making one's vegetable patch more productive, it could be making new friends, making new contacts, finding more business. So many ways in which increase could work. It depends at what level you want to operate. And then the fourth line moves. Now the fourth line, it's quite a sociable line, and it's talking about mediation. And it may be about us having to mediate something. Perhaps we need to act as a go-between between two people. Maybe things are a little bit stuck here because, Sun is conjunct the South Node. Sun conjunct the South Node can be a time in which things are a bit stuck because the South Node does represent the past. So things are stuck, perhaps. And perhaps we need to move things on. And perhaps we've got people who are stuck. And it's just important that people are able to talk to each other. And perhaps that's something we can do. We can facilitate communication. Or if we're finding it difficult to communicate with another person, then someone else can come in and start to create the connection. But it's all about increase, and increase works on many different levels. And we just have to make sure that everything is moving. Now we've had these two moving lines. That does mean that we move to a different hexagram. And that means we move to hexagram 10, which is treading. Treading is the hexagram which represents the tiger and the tiger's tail. I have this image of this tiger just sitting there in the corridor, not moving. And we have to be very careful as we walk around the tiger. And we kind of want to avoid treading on its tail, but the I Ching is telling us we shouldn't worry too much about it. We have to be careful, but we don't have to be terrified. It's a difficult situation, a situation that requires care. So we're in the process of increasing things, making things better for ourselves, making things better for ourselves and for our community. But in the process of doing this, we are creating new situations, and because of these new situations, we perhaps have new challenges, and these new challenges have to be negotiated, and we do have to tread carefully around them. But it does seem that we are going to get round it. In fact, the I Ching says that even if a tiger bites us, it's not the end of the world. So we mustn't be afraid. And, increase, I suppose, carries a certain amount of responsibility. And with increase, as we try to increase our prospects, increase our vision, our worldview, perhaps increase our circle of friends, there are some challenging events that do have to be negotiated, but it does look as if we can handle them. Now, I want to consider the Sun conjunct the South Node and what actually it might mean. So, this weekend we have the Sun conjunct the South Node. It's in Libra, and I've already suggested some aspects of what it's about, but it might represent the past. So why would it be the past, and what does it actually mean, the South Node? So, of course, in Vedic astrology, the South Node is ketu. So ketu is the tail of the demon. So I think the legend that this demon stole the potion of immortality from the gods and drank the potion, and the demon was cut in half by the gods. So you had the head and the tail. But of course, because it had drunk the potion of immortality, it was immortal. So you had the head of the demon, which is the North Node, and you had the tail of the demon, which is the South Node. And at least the head of the demon has got a head, but the tail of the demon, the South Node, doesn't even have a head. So it's this potentially quite wild, very stubborn force, the South Node. It's very persistent, but sometimes the South Node just doesn't know why it's doing what it's doing. So that's one aspect of the South Node, of how you understand what the South Node actually means. The South Node in traditional Western astrology is connected with Saturn. It's considered to be malefic, and the North Node is actually considered to be benefic. So that's one way of looking at it. William Lilly, in Christian astrology, when he was writing in the 17th century, he often associated the nodes on the ascendant with kind of facial blemishes. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's, when he had a horary question, he would try to describe people, and he would use the North and South nodes to, I think he'd often used it to describe, warts, other blemishes that might be on someone's face. I'm not sure if we can really sort of use that. South Node can also be about reputation. I would have said the North Node is about good reputation, and the South Node is about a bad reputation. That sort of makes sense. Now, the German schools of astrology, both Alfred Witte and Ebertin, see the North and South Node as an axis. They don't really seem to care about whether it's a North Node or the South Node. They just see it as an overall axis, which is about connections. And I don't think that's the sense that most astrologers seem to do that, but I think it does make sense that so Sun conjunct South Node is just saying something about how we connect. And so if you, for example, look at Reinhold Ebertin in Combination of Stellar Influences, he says of Sun conjunct the South Node, Sun conjunct the nodes. He just says Sun, Dragon's Head, but he doesn't really mean North Node or South Node. He's really talking about the Sun Node, and he says that the principle of Sun dragon's head is intellectual or physical associations, the public. So that would just be a way of conceiving of the Sun conjunct the nodes in general. But he does have a positive and a negative manifestation. So he'd say a positive manifestation of Sun node would be adaptation, preference for associations and for teamwork, whereas the negative manifestations would be a disharmonious attitude towards living or working together with others. Now, in terms of modern astrology, the nodes have been very much connected with karma. I think it was, I think his name was Schulman. I think he had two books. Was it part one and part two? I'm not sure. Certainly one book, but there was a book that I remember when I was starting to learn astrology. I bought the book. I haven't got access to it anymore, but he very much seemed to, if I remember rightly, be talking about some of the karmic aspects of the North Node and the South Node. You know, the idea that the North Node is where we're going to, and the South Node is where we're coming from. And I think that's probably the most popular paradigm of dealing with the nodes. So if you're thinking about the South Node, it's perhaps the temptation to go back on the things that we should have grown out of. And if you've been listening to my forecasts of the 12 signs, I mean, that's kind of what I've been trying to say, that it is about going back to something. And I use the words line of least resistance a great deal. So what I want to do is look at a few people who have Sun conjunct the South Node. And these people, some of them I don't really know very much about. And I'm going to try to make sense of their Sun conjunct South Node, which is not going to be easy because in many cases at least, I don't have their times of birth. But let's just have a look at some Sun conjunct South Node people and a couple of Sun conjunct South Node events as well. So the first person I want to look at is the most unpleasant person, is Beverly Allitt, and she was born in October the 4th, 1968. For some reason there is a birth time for her, 9:15 a.m. And she was a nurse that killed a number of babies, and I think with insulin overdoses. And it was suggested that she had what they call it, the Munchausen by proxy syndrome, you know, where she wants to create a drama and perhaps is seen as perhaps someone who perhaps can deal with the drama, and maybe that's part of what it is. And Beverly Allitt had Sun conjunct the South Node, and I'm not saying that I'm necessarily going to be able to make any sense of her Sun conjunct the South Node, and her Sun conjunct the South Node is in the 12th house. So I suppose Sun conjunct the 12th South Node in the 12th would be doing something. I suppose you could say it's doing something quite secretively, and the Sun is about Sun in Libra. It may be someone who has a very weak sense of self, and the Sun is also trine her true black moon Lilith. I don't know whether that's relevant, but so perhaps someone who has a weak sense of self, but is obsessed about herself and is obsessed perhaps about getting attention. But that's a Munchausen by proxy syndrome, and perhaps that's how the Sun conjunct South Node works, and so she feels she has to do whatever she can to get attention. I suppose if you think about the sort of Indian concept that the South Node doesn't have a head because it's been cut in half, and the question of why she's doing what she's doing, murdering babies, that may not be the point. She just does it in sort of quite an impulsive way, because it seems to be the logical way, because she's a nurse, because she has the opportunity. So that could be how the Sun conjunct South Node is working in her case. And I suppose you could say maybe that trine with the true Black Moon Lilith is facilitating that pathway. So that is a possible manifestation of the Sun conjunct the South Node. Now, another person with Sun conjunct South Node, someone completely different, is Richard Dawkins. So Richard Dawkins, he is the evolutionary biologist who is, I suppose, a militant atheist, and you can certainly see that he is an Aries if you I'm sure you've seen him on YouTube, and he is totally total Aries, really. He just says what he thinks. He doesn't seem to allow for any possibility of an alternative. He's quite dismissive of alternative arguments. He's very keen to, I suppose, insult his oppositions, insult people who disagree with him. And I think many of his critics say that Richard Dawkins has kind of gone too far. He's just too abrasive. And maybe there is a view that he's actually damaging the very cause that he's trying to promote, which is, I suppose, I suppose he would see belief in God as being sort of destructive. Didn't he write the book? Did he call it, was it The God Delusion? But anyway, he has Sun conjunct the South Node. So in his case, having Sun in Aries conjunct the South Node in Aries may indicate that, yeah, sure, we can see that he's a typical Aries. I think he's an example of someone, if you looked at a video of him, you would guess he was an Aries. It would have been very immediate that he's behaving like an Aries. But it could be that his Aries approach is somewhat self-defeating. And yeah, he can make a lot of noise about atheism. And if you're an atheist as well, you find that very entertaining and supportive. But with Sun conjunct South Node in Aries, he perhaps goes too far and he sort of alienates people. And in the end, he doesn't really get his message across as effectively as perhaps he might like. Looking at some politicians, the German, I think he's the defense minister in Germany. I noticed Boris Pistorius has Sun conjunct the South Node. Now, I don't have his time of birth. I don't know much about him. I do know that he is a militant supporter of NATO's intervention in Ukraine. He's really quite extreme. Certainly, I believe he's more extreme than the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. And so he's got Sun in Pisces conjunct the South Node. Now, one can speculate about this. Pisces perhaps represents the collective. He thinks he's a rational person. He's got Venus and Mars in Aquarius. But with Sun conjunct the South Node, I'm sure he's a very intelligent man. But Sun conjunct South Node, perhaps there's a tendency to forget logic, because Sun conjunct South Node doesn't have a brain. It doesn't really think through. Okay, it does. Of course, it does have a brain, but it doesn't fully think through what it's suggesting. And so, perhaps here is someone supportive of German intervention in Ukraine. Sun conjunct South Node in Pisces, just going with the flow, but not actually realizing what he's getting himself into. And the South Node is also the past. And he's German. Like it or not, he's connected with the past. And he's connected, with, for example, Germany's adventures in Russia during the Second World War. And he might not, I'm sure he's not consciously aware of this connection, doesn't feel that he's part of it. But maybe, when you see him as the defense minister, and you see German tanks in Kursk and other places. Sun conjunct South Node, that is a blast from the past, isn't it? So that might be, in his case, we're seeing how the Sun conjunct South Node is working. Turning to another politician, and we have Britain's foreign minister, David Lammy. So David Lammy, born July the 19th, 1972. And he has got his Sun exactly conjunct the South Node. So David Lammy is basically seen as far as I can see, as not being a very effective foreign minister. He doesn't seem to know much about foreign affairs. He, for example, was talking about Azerbaijan liberating Nagorno-Karabakh. So Azerbaijan has been at war with Armenia. Basically, Nagorno-Karabakh, as far as I know, has been ethnically cleansed by Azerbaijan. And he sort of put a blog post where he talked about the Azeris liberating this, which was kind of quite an unfortunate way of perceiving it. And so perhaps as foreign secretary, he is just being influenced by this Sun conjunct with South Node in Cancer. That strikes me as being very emotional. He's I don't know how left-wing he is, but he just may be caught on his own struggles, on what he is trying to defend, his own issues, his own emotional way of looking at the world. And Sun conjunct the South Node, he might be in his own way quite intelligent, although he's had some major fails. There was some celebrity mastermind when he got a lot of things wrong, and it was I think, was it something like he was asked one of the questions was which king followed Henry VIII, and I think he answered Henry VII. I mean, that was an example of what he said. So Sun conjunct South Node may be too rooted in the past, particularly with Cancer. Cancer is really focusing on the past, the struggles from the past, and not really being able to really address the future, and actually being in a completely different position. Now he really is foreign secretary. He's said bad things about Trump. I mean, I can't remember offhand what he said about Trump. He was really insulting about Trump. And so that could be the South Node conjunct the Sun conjunct the South Node. I would have thought his position as British Foreign Secretary is going to be undermined by what he said in the past. At the time, it might seem like a good thing to say, to insult Donald Trump in, I think, 2018, when everyone in Europe was insulting Donald Trump. But, if Donald Trump is going to become president in January, as I believe he will, then that could be difficult. So that's David Lammy's horoscope with Sun conjunct the South Node. Sid Vicious had Sun conjunct the South Node. So there's Sid Vicious's chart, and he had the Sun exactly conjunct the South Node. So how would we see that? Well, we know that Sid Vicious, he was a member of the Sex Pistols. He died of a heroin overdose in 1978. And Sun conjunct the South Node. The Sun is ruler of his 10th house, and his mother was not particularly responsible. I think his mother had heroin issues, so he was brought up in an environment which was not very healthy. And it could be that his relationship with his mother was perhaps a key part of why he died so young. And so there is his mother. Perhaps we see the Sun as a mother, Sun conjunct the South Node. We could see the South Node as being Saturnine. Of course, the Sun is also him, because it's a male chart. But perhaps the Sun conjunct the South Node, the challenge for him with the Sun conjunct the South Node was maybe to move into that Scorpio North Node, but he was stuck on something. And perhaps Sun conjunct the South Node, in some ways, we perhaps see a perversion of the sign Taurus, that perhaps Heron felt there was a sense of stability there that Heron might have given him. And so that's that's one way of which Sun conjunct the South Node might be working. Now, it may be with that North Node in Scorpio, getting involved in perhaps the Sex Pistols, trying to move away from his life. But it's North Node in Scorpio, perhaps in terms of what we're seeing when he died very young. He died when he was 20, I think. I think he died, or was 21, I think, when he died. I think he died in 1979, so he would have been just before his 21st birthday. Sorry, 20... Have I got that right? 79, just before his 22nd birthday. So perhaps that's what he was trying to work out with that North Node in Scorpio, but didn't really quite make it. But I think that South Node conjunct the Sun in Taurus is difficult, and I think his mother is kind of linked with it. And he was, with Sun conjunct the South Node, you get the idea of someone who is very stuck in a particular pattern. Now, he might have got that pattern from his mother, so a certain pattern of behaviour just keeps repeating, and it's just so difficult for him to get out of it. And so in the end, he couldn't. I think it was John Lyndon, who used to be Johnny Rotten, was talking about the tragedy of Sid Vicious and how difficult it was being a member of the Sex Pistols, and how I think he regrets bringing Sid Vicious into the Sex Pistols, and he just couldn't deal with the lifestyle, and he just went back into the past. And so that might be how that exact Sun conjunct the South Node was working. And so someone different who seems to have kind of embraced their destiny to an extent was Li Wenliang. Now, Li Wenliang was the doctor who first identified or first warned about COVID, and I think he was an eye doctor. He caught COVID from one of his patients, I think in Wuhan, and of course, the Chinese government didn't want to know anything about it. They tried to close him down, I think, but he was the one that called the warning, and he died of COVID. And he has the Sun conjunct the South Node with North Node in Aries. So this may be an example of perhaps of a transition. So if he's got the Sun conjunct the South Node, you might say that his natural impulse, Sun in Libra, conjunct the South Node, is to do what he's told, to follow the party line. If we need to, we don't want to rock the boat. The Chinese authorities have to keep control of things. So that would be his natural inclination. But maybe what was going on in his life is that North Node in Aries was starting to kick in, but he was able to break free from his Sun conjunct the South Node and actually get into his North Node in Aries. And he publicized what was happening, and in the process he died. But he probably would have died anyway. But perhaps in terms of his death, if you're into sort of reincarnation and karma, it all went. You could say that he did the right thing. He died, and he moved on, and he was. I suppose that would bode well for his karmic progress. I mean, I kind of don't like to speculate too much about karma. Indeed, I don't want to really speculate about it at all. But I think that is a way one might see his Sun conjunct the South Node in Libra with that North Node in Aries, and how it how it might actually be working. Princess Catherine has got Sun conjunct the South Node. There's her chart, and of course she's married to Prince William, and I think her Sun conjunct the South Node really does work well. Now, she has obviously been under a huge amount of pressure for the last year with her cancer diagnosis, and it must have been very difficult for her. But it must have been very difficult for her leading the life she's leading with that Sun conjunct the South Node. You see, if you look at Princess Catherine's chart, we've got the Moon conjunct the North Node and Sun conjunct the South Node. So you could say that the Moon conjunct the North Node is where she's supposed to be going. This was someone who basically, with the Moon conjunct Cancer conjunct the North Node, is looking for, I think, a life which is real, fairly low profile. Moon in the 12th house, North Node in the 12th house. That's what she should be. Her parents, as I get the impression, were fairly aspirational. They had their business. What were they selling? Party products or something. So there was perhaps pressure, and she perhaps had this aspirational lifestyle. And marrying Prince William and all of the accoutrements of royalty, that's all Sun conjunct South Node. This is not what she wanted. This is not for her. She should have been keeping a low profile with Moon conjunct the North Node. But no, she gets caught up in Sun conjunct the South Node, which is Capricorn, having to be the Princess of Wales, having to be a role model, having to turn up to functions and being perfect. And it's Capricorn. Being Princess of, Prince Catherine, Princess of Wales, whatever. It's the formality of that Sun conjunct the South Node is not where she should be going, and perhaps that provides some of the context for what's happened and the fact that she had cancer. It seems very young to have cancer. Hopefully she's now got over it. I believe she has got it. I hope so. Everything's all right, but maybe at some level, that was the North Node cutting in. It was telling Catherine that she needed to not just take a break, but this was not really the right lifestyle for her. So I think she's a good example of the Sun conjunct the South Node. And I don't think the formality and the prison-like formality of a royal family with that Sun conjunct South Node in Capricorn is right for her. Too much 6th house, and she needs more 12th house. And so those are the people I want to look at, because I'm running out of time. So let's look at a couple of events very quickly. The fall of Constantinople. By the way, that is June the 7th. It didn't fall on June the 7th, but my program has this insistence of converting things to the Gregorian calendar. It wants me to convert to the Gregorian calendar. I understand it wasn't on June the 7th, but don't worry, I have got the day right. It's just the date doesn't look right. So, fall of Constantinople, Sun conjunct the South Node. This might be the ending of something. It's suggesting it wasn't a very positive event. Of course, an event like the fall of Constantinople is such a big event. It was completely fated. It had to happen. But I suppose with the Sun conjunct South Node, you could see the Sun as representing some kind of an empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. Sun conjunct the South Node, that might be the final end of it all. And talking about another collapse, the capitulation of Denmark to the Nazis, when Denmark surrendered to Nazi Germany, that happened when you had the Sun conjunct the South Node, and I suppose that's the ending of something. Although, of course, the capitulation of Denmark was not quite the same as the capitulation of other countries that the Germans invaded, because I believe that the structure of society didn't change much when the Germans invaded. The Germans, I think, by and large, let things carry on. I think even the monarch stayed in place. And perhaps that's Sun conjunct the South Node. It's a kind of a strange kind of invasion. Sun, South Node, and Jupiter all together, and so there is that perhaps emphasis on the past. So perhaps the past, perhaps in a fortunate sense, was able to maintain itself, and of course, because the structure of Denmark by and large stayed the same, it perhaps was not as traumatic as in other places, and so that's Denmark. I'm not sure how much we can read into it. And finally, a future event, October the 1st. I don't know what time. This is when Mark Rutte becomes the new Secretary General of NATO. This is a chart for the new Secretary General of NATO, which, it's happening in a couple of days' time with Sun conjunct the South Node. Is that a good time for a new leader of NATO? Sun conjunct the South Node, it's not really helpful, is it? And Mercury's conjunct the South Node. He becomes leader, and it's all very much about the past. That's what he represents, the past. He doesn't really represent the future. It's not a fortunate time for someone new to come in as head of NATO. And of course, we've got the Moon is opposition. Moon is opposition Neptune. I mean, it's not a great chart. And yes, but at the same time, Sun conjunct the South Node. It's about leadership, but an unthinking leadership. It's almost a reactive leadership. It's responding in a particular way without actually thinking about the situation. And of course, that's not great. There's a war NATO's got this war with Russia that needs to be sorted out, but I don't think that that's very fortunate, having the Sun conjunct the South Node. And of course, the South Node is about reputation, and I don't think it's very good for his reputation, and I don't think it's very good for NATO's reputation. Anyway, that's it. That's all I'm going to say on the subject of Sun conjunct the South Node. It's a bit difficult talking about the Sun conjunct the South Node. It's a hard aspect to get one's teeth into, but I'm just, with a few examples, I just wanted to try to give some idea about what it might mean. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.